When it all ended in stillness and a flash of twisted metal, he was just 21 years old. Eddie Cochran, a rock and roll pioneer, passed away too soon. And the story he left behind is eerie. His chart-topping stardom was followed by a startlingly low net worth, an abandoned house frozen in time, and a spouse he never married. This is the unremembered legacy of an early deceased legend. Let's find the parts he never managed to complete. Tragic events occurred in the rock and roll industry on the evening of April 16, 1960, when Eddie Cochran, a rising American star, was killed in a vehicle accident while on tour in the United Kingdom. He had just completed his last performance of the tour at the Bristol Hippodrome, where he shared the stage with Gene Vincent, another legendary figure in rock and roll. The tour had been a huge success, electrifying crowds in Britain and contributing to the transatlantic boom of American rock music. Cochran, Vincent, and others started the trip back to London after the show. They planned on arriving at Heathrow Airport in order to board a flight back to the United States. They chartered a 1960 Ford Consul, Mark II saloon, a cream-colored vehicle, to undertake the nighttime journey. The driver, George Martin, was a 19-year-old who had nothing to do with the renowned Beatles producer of the same name. There were 5 persons in the automobile: Martin, Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent, their 29-year-old tour manager, Patrick Tompkins, and Sharon Sheeley, Cochran's lover and a successful composer. Right at 11:50 p.m., the vehicle lost control at Roden Hill while passing through the town of Chippenham on the Bath Road. The road was dry and the weather had been clear. Later on, though, it was discovered that the car had been moving too fast. The Ford Consul struck a concrete lamppost without the assistance of another car. It was a serious blow. In an impulsive attempt to shield Sharon Sheeley, Eddie Cochran, who was seated in the middle of the rear seat, threw himself over her. Tragically, the impact forced the left rear passenger door to open, ejecting Cochran from the vehicle. But his noble deed probably saved her life. He most certainly suffered blunt force damage to his skull, which resulted in a severe traumatic brain injury. All of the injured passengers were promptly taken to Chippenham Community Hospital by emergency personnel, and then they were moved to St. Bath's Martin's Hospital. Cochran never recovered consciousness, despite efforts to save him. 4:10 p.m. Eddie Cochran was declared deceased the next day, Easter Sunday, April 17. He was only 21. A trail of injuries was left by the accident. Sheeley sustained injuries to both her thigh and back. Gene Vincent suffered severe injuries to both legs and a fractured clavicle, which would follow him for the rest of his life. Tompkins sustained facial injuries and what seemed to be a fractured skull. George Martin, the driver, came out of the accident unharmed. Sheeley and Vincent were shaken and altered permanently when they returned to the United States. Cochran's remains was also flown home, and after a private burial he was buried on April 25, 1960 at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Cypress, California. In an interview with Photoplay magazine, Sharon Sheeley later disclosed in a chilling postscript to the tragedy that Cochran had voiced a spooky premonition just hours prior to the collision. "You know, Sherry, I've got a queer feeling that fate's not going to let us be together. Something awful is going to happen. I can feel it." Following the tragic car accident that killed Eddie Cochran on the night of April 16, 1960, legal action was taken against the vehicle's driver, George Martin, who was only 19 at the time. He reportedly turned to her as they were getting ready to leave for the airport. Martin was found to have been driving too fast, which caused him to lose control and eventually crash into a concrete lamppost at Roden Hill, Chippenham. Even though the weather was nice and the roads were dry, the crash did not involve any other vehicles. Given the number of fatalities and the severity of the passengers' injuries, Martin was later found guilty of reckless driving, a serious offense. He was fined £50, which at the time was a significant amount, and if he didn't pay, he would be imprisoned for 6 months. He was also barred from driving for 15 years, which essentially took away his ability to legally drive for a large chunk of his adult life. This disqualification did not, however, last the entire period. Only 8 years after the event, on May 7, 1968, a judge at the Bristol Assizes revoked the restriction. The court's ruling came after it was determined that Martin had suffered significant financial hardship in the years after the collision. Public documents did not specify the specifics of these difficulties, but it was known that the accident's financial and personal repercussions had had a significant impact on him. Eddie Cochran's personal things and the smashed Ford Consul were among the crash-related items seized at the Chippenham police station. Cochran's beloved Gretsch 6120 guitar, a distinctive orange instrument that is closely linked to his sound, was one of these possessions. A teenage David Harmon, who was a police cadet stationed there at the time, allegedly used the occasion to play Cochran's guitar. Later, Harmon would become well known in the music industry as Dave D., the vocalist of the well-liked band Dave D. Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Titch from the 1960s. In British rock history, the occasion represented an odd meeting point between the past and the future. One star has already passed away, while another has not yet surfaced. Cochran's reputation endured over the years, especially in Chippenham, the town where the disaster happened. As a memorial and a warning about the perils of careless driving, a plaque was placed on Roden Hill to identify the precise location of the deadly collision. The grounds of St. Martin's Hospital in Bath, where Cochran was transported after the collision and subsequently passed away, were the site of another noteworthy memorial. The memorial stone is located on the hospital's former chapel grounds. To commemorate Cochran's legacy, a plaque was placed next to a nearby sundial, and the stone was meticulously restored on the 50th anniversary of his passing in 2010. 2018 saw additional initiatives to protect his legacy. In order to rebuild the memorial plaque at the crash site, and add a new base feature called 3 Steps to Heaven, named after Cochran's posthumously released single, the Eddie Cochran Memorial Project started a fundraising effort. The installation was intended to serve as a tangible memorial, as well as a metaphorical depiction of Cochran's short life, extraordinary gift, and lasting impact on future generations of rock and roll performers. Over time, a little-known fact about the crash night also surfaced. Cochran and Vincent had apparently been asked to share the taxi ride with Tony Sheridan, a young musician who would subsequently work with the Beatles in their early Hamburg days. Due to space constraints or pre-arranged schedules, both performers graciously turned down his offer. Sheridan was saved from the fatal accident by that straightforward turn of circumstances, which gave the sad events of the night a terrifying what-if element. Are you interested in Eddie Cochran's personal life besides his passing? Like the music that united them, Eddie Cochran and Sharon Sheeley had a passionate and dynamic romantic connection. Sheeley was more than simply a pretty face. She was an up-and-coming artist in her own right, a talented singer-songwriter with a keen eye for pop successes and extensive knowledge of the music business. She had been exposed to rock and roll at a young age, since she had been under the supervision of manager Jerry Capart, who also managed Cochran. Sheeley had a deep, if apparently unrequited, admiration for Cochran prior to their relationship. She had been enamored with him for about 2 years, and she watched his ascent to popularity with the same sense of wonder and desire that many young ladies of that time felt. Sheeley took bold steps, determined to get his attention. She changed her appearance from being a brunette to a blonde in order to make a statement. In an attempt to win over the vivacious and rebellious heartthrob, she also made an investment in a new clothing. She finally had her opportunity at the end of 1958 when she went to a party in New York City that Cochran had thrown for New Year's Eve. Her efforts paid off that evening. Cochran started to view her differently, whether it was because of her new appearance, her charisma, or just the right moment. Their connection, which was based on a mutual love of music as well as attraction, developed into something significant after that night. Sheeley made a direct professional contribution to Cochran's career. She composed a number of songs for him, such as Cherished Memories and Love Again, demonstrating her lyrical sensitivity as well as her awareness of Cochran's emotional and musical spectrum. Most famously, she co-wrote Something Else, a raw, upbeat anthem that became one of Cochran's most famous songs in 1959. As evidence of how deeply she had integrated herself into Eddie's life, both personally and professionally, she co-wrote the song with his brother, Bill Cochran. The two had secretly become engaged by 1960 and were making arrangements to start a future together. Beyond the thrill of a brief relationship, their bond had grown stronger. It had developed into something based on a desire to have a long-lasting relationship and common goals. However, they kept their engagement a secret because of the demands of celebrity and public scrutiny. Until it reappeared in popular culture decades later, their love tale was mostly forgotten. As part of their Levi's 501 campaign, Levi Strauss & Company launched a television ad in 1988 called Simply Eddie Cochran. The ad focused on the notion of old Americana and teenage defiance, a highly dramatized story of how Sheeley allegedly initially attracted Cochran's notice. At the 1958 New Year's Eve party was presented in the Sid McCartney directed advertisement. It was all because she was wearing jeans made by Levis. Actress Sharon Devlin played Sheila in the commercial, which was depicted as being told by Sheila herself, giving the narrative a sentimental and intimate touch. Cochran's timeless classic, Come On Everybody, a high-energy rock and roll song that encapsulated the spirit of the time and Cochran's flair, was used on the commercial's soundtrack. A new generation of listeners was introduced to Cochran's music when the song was released as a promotional single, and a compilation CD of his biggest hits followed the campaign. It's time for us to have a look at Eddie Cochran's residences. The Cochran family moved around a lot when Eddie was growing up, which was a result of the post-Depression and post-war era's shifting employment prospects and financial strains. The family first settled in Oklahoma City after a few early years in Minnesota. Eddie became more familiar with American country and Western music there. The 1940s saw a constant presence of Southern rhythms, Western swing, and the expanding impact of honky-tonk in Oklahoma. Later, Eddie's blending of styles would be influenced by these sounds, which gave his music a distinct voice that distinguished him from many of his peers. After some time, the family made California their permanent home, where Eddie would grow up and develop his musical individuality. The relocation to the southeast Los Angeles County community of Bell Gardens turned out to be crucial. In the 1950s, California was a cultural melting pot and a center for musical innovation. The vibrant music environment soon engulfed young Eddie, who was influenced by jazz, blues, country, rhythm and blues, and the new rock and roll genre. Despite learning to play a number of instruments and demonstrating an early interest in music, Eddie was most enthralled with the guitar. He was well known as a superb musician by the time he entered high school. In addition to their musical prowess, performers like Chad Atkins and Les Paul notably influenced him with their innovative work in multi-track recording and guitar methods, two things that Cochran would eventually dabble with himself. Along with two pals from school, he established a band, and the three of them started playing around town. Even though he was still a teenager, Eddie immediately gained recognition for his stage presence and guitar prowess. He started working as a studio musician and recording demos around this period, supporting other artists and developing his abilities in formal settings. Eddie gained an exceptionally sophisticated understanding of how to construct a song from the ground up as a result of this period of intense learning, which also helped him grow as a producer and arranger in addition to his performance skills. When he joined forces with manager and songwriter Jerry Capehart, who saw Eddie's star potential, he made his breakthrough. They combined Capehart's knowledge of the burgeoning teen market with Eddie's musical ability to write and record a series of songs that encapsulated the restless spirit of adolescence. Sitting in the Balcony, which debuted on the Billboard charts and brought Eddie to a national audience, was one of their first major hits in 1957. After the Cochran family relocated from the Midwest to California's musical heartland, Eddie found himself at the front of a cultural shift. He came to represent the modern American teen. Rebellious, cool, and full of electric intensity, Eddie Cochran would make a lasting impact on music history in a matter of years, contributing to the earliest and most thrilling incarnation of rock and roll. When Eddie Cochran was just 13 years old in 1952, the Cochran family moved into Bell Gardens, a humble working-class suburb of Los Angeles County, California, which would become their most permanent and influential home. The family moved to Gage Street, a peaceful area with close-knit families and modest single-story homes. Despite its modest appearance, Eddie's transformation would take place here at Bell Gardens. The post-war boom had transformed Southern California into a vibrant cultural melting pot, transforming him from an inquisitive young man with a guitar into one of the first rock and roll pioneers. Additionally, it provided the ideal setting for Eddie, a teenager, to experiment with music. The 1950s were a time of high school dances, jukeboxes, and hot rods in Bell Gardens, with Hollywood only a short drive away and the emergence of American youth culture. A perfect setting for a budding artist with undeveloped talent and ambition. In order to become proficient on the guitar, Eddie would frequently lock himself in his bedroom at home on Gage Street. Years before, he had started to show an interest in music by playing the piano, ukulele, and drums. But what really captured his attention was the guitar. Eddie's playing style, which combined rockabilly swagger, blues phrasing, and country picking, was influenced by technical masters like Cadet Atkins and country music icons like Hank Williams. He started laying the groundwork for the distinctive sound that would eventually enthrall audiences worldwide during these hours of practice in the family's living room and garage. Eddie wasn't satisfied with playing by himself. He started playing in bands with classmates and friends from the area as early as junior high school. Although these were frequently unofficial bands performing at neighborhood gatherings, youth centers, and school functions, Eddie gained essential experience in live performance and musical teamwork from them. In addition to his talent, he soon gained recognition from his colleagues for his charisma and self-assurance on stage. Before he got a record deal, he was a natural performer. Eddie and his friend Hank Cochran, who was unrelated but had the same last name, were members of one of his first bands, the Cochran brothers. The pair performed locally and even managed to land a few small-time jobs in California, specializing in country and Western music. Although Eddie's personal preferences were starting to change, their harmonies and clean-cut approach suited the prevailing tastes of the period. More significantly, he was captivated to the rebellious spirit that was brewing in early rock and roll, as well as the new sound of rhythm and blues. Eddie was able to fully immerse himself in the thriving Southern California music scene. Because Bell Gardens was close enough to Los Angeles, he went to local concerts whenever he could, listened to late-night radio broadcasts, and frequently visited record stores. He took it all in. He files away voice styles, guitar riffs, and recording methods as sources of inspiration for his own musical development. Eddie's talent was obvious by the time he started high school. He began creating original songs, recording demo cassettes, and experimenting with multi-track recording, quite sophisticated for a youngster in the early 1950s. The post-war boom had transformed Southern California into a vibrant cultural melting pot, transforming him from an inquisitive young man with a guitar into one of the first rock and roll pioneers. Additionally, it provided the ideal setting for Eddie, a teenager, to experiment with music. The 1950s were a time of high school dances, jukeboxes, and hot rods in Bell Gardens, with Hollywood only a short drive away and the emergence of American youth culture. A perfect setting for a budding artist with undeveloped talent and ambition. In order to become proficient on the guitar, Eddie would frequently lock himself in his bedroom at home on Gage Street. Years before, he had started to show an interest in music by playing the piano, ukulele, and drums. But what really captured his attention was the guitar. Eddie's playing style, which combined rockabilly swagger, blues phrasing, and country picking, was influenced by technical masters like Cadet Atkins and country music icons like Hank Williams. He started laying the groundwork for the distinctive sound that would eventually enthrall audiences worldwide during these hours of practice in the family's living room and garage. Eddie wasn't satisfied with playing by himself. He started playing in bands with classmates and friends from the area as early as junior high school. Although these were frequently unofficial bands performing at neighborhood gatherings, youth centers, and school functions, Eddie gained essential experience in live performance and musical teamwork from them. In addition to his talent, he soon gained recognition from his colleagues for his charisma and self-assurance on stage. Before he got a record deal, he was a natural performer. Eddie and his friend Hank Cochran, who was unrelated but had the same last name, were members of one of his first bands, the Cochran brothers. The pair performed locally and even managed to land a few small-time jobs in California, specializing in country and Western music. Although Eddie's personal preferences were starting to change, their harmonies and clean-cut approach suited the prevailing tastes of the period. More significantly, he was captivated to the rebellious spirit that was brewing in early rock and roll, as well as the new sound of rhythm and blues. Eddie was able to fully immerse himself in the thriving Southern California music scene. Because Bell Gardens was close enough to Los Angeles, he went to local concerts whenever he could, listened to late-night radio broadcasts, and frequently visited record stores. He took it all in. He files away voice styles, guitar riffs, and recording methods as sources of inspiration for his own musical development. Eddie's talent was obvious by the time he started high school. He began creating original songs, recording demo cassettes, and experimenting with multi-track recording, quite sophisticated for a youngster in the early 1950s. He would go on to become known as a visionary producer and arranger, in addition to being a musician, because of his expertise with sound technology and studio procedures. As his fame grew quickly, Eddie Cochran and his family moved from Bell Gardens to a beautiful suburban house on Bernice Circle in Bua Park, California, in 1959. During the post-war boom, Bua Park, which is tucked away in northern Orange County, was a burgeoning neighborhood with wide streets, new house projects, and a clean suburban feel. Moving to Bernice Circle was more than simply a change of address for the Cochran family. It was a symbolic step toward a more settled and comfortable living that mirrored Eddie's increasing popularity as a performer and recording artist. Eddie would spend the last year of his life in the house on Bernice Circle, which became his last family home. Tours, recording sessions, and public appearances took up more and more of his time. But whenever he came home, Bernice Circle provided him with a peaceful space to regroup, compose music, and spend time with his loved ones, especially his devoted parents, Frank and Alice Cochran. It was a simple but cozy house with well-kept grounds and amiable neighbors, a location where Eddie could unwind in comfortable surroundings and get away from the hustle and bustle of the industry. Eddie was more than just a budding local talent by this time. He had established himself as a major rock and roll star with classics like Come On Everybody, Summertime Blues, 1958, and Something Else. He frequently made appearances on television, starred in the 1959 movie Go Johnny Go, and went on lengthy U.S. tours. He maintained a close bond with his family in spite of his notoriety. To the surprise of the neighbors, he frequently invited friends and partners from the music industry back to the Bernice Circle house, where jam sessions would periodically start in the living room or garage. Eddie continued to grow as a singer, producer, and studio innovator while he was residing in Buena Park. He regularly experimented with overdubbing and multi-track recording in home sessions, and he was one of the few musicians of his day who fully knew the recording process, from sound mixing to microphone placement. He maintained guitars, recording gear, and notebooks full of song ideas at Bernice Circle, where he conducted some of this creative activity. His innovative desire to manipulate the sound of his songs had an impact on later rock and pop musicians. Regarding Eddie Cochran, what are your thoughts? Please share your thoughts in the space provided below. We hope this video has been useful to you. If you enjoy it, remember to subscribe to the channel, share it, and give a like. I appreciate you viewing, and I hope to see you in the upcoming videos. Farewell.